our main speaker, Dr. Lawrence Rosenberg. He, as many of you know, he's president and CEO of the Integrated Health and Social Services University Network of West Central Montreal, which means he runs an organization that takes care of basically most of the healthcare needs of a large part of the Montreal population. He's also a professor of surgery and medicine at McGill, and he maintains an active research lab on diabetes and at the Lady Davis Institute for Medical Research. Prior to becoming the head of the CUS in 2015, Dr. Rosenberg has served as the executive director of the Jewish General Hospital, where this conference is located. I'll add on a more personal note that it's having observed the Quebec healthcare scene for many years. Dr. Rosenberg is unique among his peers in his unwavering focus on improving things and embracing innovation. And that is a challenge in a system that typically, where change happens slowly, if I may put it that way. So with great interest that I look forward to hearing from Dr. Lawrence Rosenberg. Dr. Rosenberg.
Thank you, Samar. Good morning, everyone. And thank you all for attending this workshop. I'm really quite excited to hear what everyone will be contributing over the next 2 days. I just have a very few number of comments to make, which are perhaps purposely going to end up being a little bit controversial, but that will fit in with the picture I think Samar just painted of how I conduct business here in our own healthcare constituency. I think to begin with, it's interesting to first think about what a consumer is. You know, a consumer is not just someone consuming per se, but it's someone who has a choice and someone who is free to make a choice and someone who can then afford to pay for the choice which they've chosen. And at the end, of course, it's someone who receives something in return for the payment that they've made. And when one thinks of a consumer in this perhaps more traditional way, if you look at many countries today around the world, Canada being one in particular, I would argue, in fact, that the patient isn't the consumer in the healthcare business. It's actually the government. And that the patient is really a passive recipient of the care which is purchased on their behalf by their respective governments. And I think this really changes the way one begins to look at things. And this becomes very apparent if you actually go into the fine detail of the Canada Health Act in particular and try to understand what people are entitled to or not entitled to as citizens in Canada with respect to receiving healthcare. So my contention would be that in many places around the world, it is actually governments who are the consumers of healthcare, not individual patients. But the delivery of care is actually undergoing a very rapid sea change today. And we are moving out of the traditional realm of what was called intuitive medicine and then empirical medicine to what we are beginning to see as precision medicine or personalized medicine. You know, in former days, when the practice of medicine was intuitive or empirical or rule-based, I would say, virtually all the power in the system was in the hands of care providers, which was primarily physicians. And the beneficiaries at the time, who were individuals, not governments, because governments weren't really in healthcare over the last few hundred years, did have to pay to consume the care that was provided to them. So perhaps this paradigm of the patient consumer might be more fitting to 100 or 200 years ago than it might be today. But let me actually throw out something which you might think to be rather ridiculous, but I think I'm going to say it to make a point. In Canada, for example, which is a country that is very heavily based in natural resources, as many of you know, we have a very robust logging and lumber industry. Fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of the hardwood in this country, which is cut down primarily in the western part of the country, is sent out of the country to furniture manufacturers and lumber manufacturers in the US, and then sold back into Canada as finished product, either fine furniture or lumber for construction. So, you know, how ridiculous would it be for the furniture manufacturers, for example, in the United States, to say to the Canadian lumber producers, please send us pro bono, gratis, all your lumber, and we will be so good as to process it into fine furniture and sell it back to you when we have finished processing the raw lumber. Now, you know, you might think that's a ridiculous paradigm, but let me bring you into the modern digital era and give you the counterpoint, which is companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook, among others, literally, they would say take, but I would say steal our personal information, our personal feelings, our decisions, our data, often without permission, often without acknowledgement or consent, and then monetize that for their own profit, charging us for whatever services or products they will return to us based on the personal information they basically took from us without paying for. So why am I going down this route? As we enter the realm of precision medicine, which is being made possible by tremendous advances in genomics and AI, artificial intelligence, the real driver of this evolution of medicine is actually our own personal data, without which there can be no evolution of precision medicine. And I need not point out that as AI matures, the need for physicians in certain areas will diminish, particularly in radiology, which we're seeing today, pathology, which we will see shortly, and perhaps even in areas such as psychiatry. And so, as precision medicine evolves and becomes the way we do business, our personal data will become the foundation for the future evolving healthcare system. And so why would it be ridiculous to conceive a paradigm in which our personal data becomes a product that we sell as individuals to the new generation of consumers that are the pharmaceutical industry, the genomics industry, and physicians for that matter, who want to be able to provide a service in return? Why should it be that the patient consumer remains a passive recipient of care that they're forced to pay for or through which they're taxed, instead of being the driver of the next generation of healthcare, which is going to be totally predicated on the availability of more and more personal medical and social information? How is it that in this one economic and social domain, we do not have the control over our own information, which somehow, you know, is taken from us and then we're charged for in return when we have to pay for medical services or when we're taxed by government so they can provide medical services in turn. So that is the argument I'd like to put out this morning. And I'd love to hear some discussion around the fact that, you know, more than being patient consumers, without the data which we can provide and which is our proprietary information, precision medicine cannot happen. So those are my introductory comments for the workshop.
Thank you, Dr. Rosenberg. It's a great way to start the morning, and these are big issues, and I'm sure our participants have want to react and debate or even ask questions about. So the floor is open for people who want to make questions. So I'll take you in the order you appear in the chat. So just say me, or can I make a comment? And so our first question is from Elizabeth McNamara.
Sorry, thank you very much. I have to say this is an exciting day, and I don't want to compare it to last year, but I have to say my whole heart and soul is in it. I think Dr. Elder and Rosenberg have done a tremendous job, because we're beginning to genuinely put the patient at the center, and we're dealing with a moral issue. So the real issue that I have with this patient as consumer, as portrayed by Tomes, is really that I'm old, okay, I'm 67. So I belong to a period when medicine was a vocation. And medicine is piece by piece becoming a job, as is nursing. And the truth is taking out that moral responsibility that you have to a patient. It's not buyer beware, because that's what we're getting a lot of. You know, you see it in the US, it really is, you know, here are the side effects, you should get this is good for you. I also really like what Laurie just did, which is he's essentially saying it's not the patient who's consumer, it's actually the government. And Ireland, I'm Irish, in case you haven't picked up the accent, but Ireland has just recently had a mega hack, presumably from Russia or something. And certain patient data has just gone on the dark web. And in actual fact, the data that's gone on the dark web, these patients are now getting hits from countries outside Ireland saying, listen, we can do your hip surgery for a very short amount of money, we can do it. So essentially, I mean, they have just had their free lumber, and they're now hitting all these different patients. And the question is like, this is what's going to happen. I mean, this information is so valuable that people who are not governments are paying huge amounts. And again, I would actually agree with Laurie. I mean, look at people like Google, they made 52 billion without taxes in Europe, and they're paying for nothing. And so like, I think this is a very exciting way forward, because we do need to understand what's going on. And I think we do need to actually be part. And I think patients, doctors, nurses, tech experts, all of these people, I mean, all of us and people like us and more need to really get involved. I think it's really, really important. Thank you both. I really appreciated it.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Unless our speakers want to react, we move on to the next comment or question. So I'll move on to the next question. It's from Kabari Dasgupta.
Hi there.
Kabari.
I have to second this. What a great opportunity to think about something that is kind of in the background of what we do, but we're not bringing it, forward. And this is really wonderful. As I was listening to the two talks just now, it struck me that, we really have to think of patients not as a homogeneous group, but, on the one hand, we have that informed, motivated patient who's able to go after information and tackle injustices or problems. And on the other hand, we really do have vulnerable people who are subject to all forms of marketing and coercion. And we don't need to look far, in the Donald Trump world to see what kind of myths people can become susceptible to. So I think, that's maybe the challenge is a consumer can be empowered and informed or vulnerable, and maybe navigating that is the challenge. And perhaps that if the two groups can come together and kind of protect one another, that might be an opportunity. And then the other piece is, I did like what Dr. Rosenberg said about the government being the consumer or the customer. But the government is supposed to represent us. We're supposed to, it's our needs as a society and as citizens. And I think it's that shift and challenge that's really kind of at the center of a lot of this, because if the government serves the people, then that they are a bridge. So those would be my comments.
Thank you, Kaberi. If I can continue with one more comment, and we will maybe ask the speakers to react a bit. One more comment by Thomas, please.
Yes, Lawrence, what you said about the patient as being a data source reminded me of the talk that we're going to hear, and I already read tomorrow by Dr. Shara Vostrel, about the patient becoming an informant. And this points to the fact that this status of being a patient not only comes with a role of being passive and being not in charge, it also comes with a certain protection that when you change that role, if you give up the patient role, is no longer carried over. So the protection, for example, of confidentiality, it applies to a patient, but not to the sick person as a data source. So that means we have to be very careful when we switch from the patient role to other roles. It can be the consumer role, it can be the informant role. I guess, Shara, maybe you have also some comment on that from your point of view, from your work.
Well, I had not made the connection to the healthcare setting, and these comments really drive the point home. So when we have been, much of society has been focused on the GAFA, the Googles, the Amazons, the Facebooks, how they're collecting these amazing troves of data about us, and you all mentioned it, and kind of we have a saying that says, if you're not paying for the service, you are the product in that service, right? So you are like the person who's being exploited to pay for the service. So there's money to be made in that service, and in a sense, that's what those technology platforms do. They take your private and semi-private utterances and activities online and use all this trace data to turn you into a product that they package and sell to advertisers and other people who want to benefit from you. And you are the passive. You receive very little. You get a chance to participate in that online ecosystem and maybe with your friends, but in return, the valuable part is taken by these companies who are getting rich kind of using us as free basically inputs. So the fact that this happens in healthcare is even more impactful and dangerous, and potentially and more valuable in a sense as an opportunity for companies to make money out of your valuable data that can lead to precision solutions, precision treatments, and so on. So it is something that's broader than medicine, but it's also something that calls for regulation. And I know that legal scholars are getting very interested in the topic, and governments such as the European governments have been at the forefront of trying to regulate this nascent exploitative relationship between us and those companies. So it is a broader societal issue, and I think we can all benefit from that. So I have a comment from Shara Vostrel. Shara, please.
Hi, yeah, this is some of the things I've been trying to parse through, and you'll hear more tomorrow, but a few of the concepts that start to intersect are confidentiality, like Thomas mentioned, and when it's attached to the role of patient, that's very different. What in my research that I'm looking at is anonymity versus confidentiality, which are two separate things. And then the other component is privacy. And privacy is, again, it means something different than just anonymity. And privacy is often related to whiteness. So white people are often have the privilege of privacy more than people of color. And so there's whiteness wrapped up into a lot of this, at least in the American case, and I wouldn't doubt beyond. So I think those identities are also all kind of woven in and involved in understanding what it means when health is datafied. And we haven't done a very good job so far in being able to parse that out to protect people, because I think in the end, this is the thing all of us are very concerned about is, how do we maintain our dignity in this space where we're sort of ping-ponged around different, as a patient or consumer or as an informant, and who has access to our bodies. And, I keep thinking back to like the Immoral Life of Henrietta Lacks, right? Like it's going from her using her body and her person, and we're still extracting. And, she was like the canary in the coal mine for this, and we still haven't gotten it. So that's why these conversations are really important as it's converting to data. Or digital data, I should say.
Thank you, Shara. Dr. Rosenberg or
I would
others?
just say that, everything that's been said certainly resonates with me, but I think what I'm hearing is people are still talking about or thinking about a dichotomy of we and they, consumer and provider, without really realizing that the individual that we may conceive of as being the consumer may actually at the same time be the provider in today's digital world. And it isn't as black and white as it may have been, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years ago, where the patient truly was the patient and the patient was the consumer of whatever care was provided to them or offered to them. I think we're moving rapidly into an era where that is going to be quite different. And I think from not only a privacy and confidentiality point of view, but from a personal economic point of view, there's no reason why every patient shouldn't consider themselves to be an inherent corporation with a product to put out there and sell. And perhaps a perfect example I can give you is an experience we went through in the hospital during the year of the pandemic, in which we were approached by a company, and I won't mention any names, who had developed a very interesting app, which would sit either on an Android phone or an app phone that would enable the user of the app to actually diagnose themselves to a high degree of certainty whether or not they had early COVID or not, based on the vital signs that the app was able to pick up from the patient without any intervention or wearable being in play. It was just looking at the screen of the app. And the app was able to figure out what your oxygen tension was, what your respiratory rate was, what your heart rate was. And, the company that developed this thought it was great until we actually put it into a trial and discovered that there were all sorts of problems with it that the company didn't know about, because obviously patients with different skin tones and colors react differently to the app, or the app reacts differently to them. And not only that, the color of the clothes they were wearing seemed to dictate the accuracy of the reading of the app as well. The company knew nothing about this. And in fact, we should have charged the company to demo this product on their behalf, to come up with all these glitches so that they could go back to their AI algorithms and improve them in a way that would make the app useful. And here's a perfectly good example of how putative consumers were really going to be taken advantage of by a company with a technology that really didn't work. And the only way to improve the technology was to engage the putative consumer to be able to bring that product up to a commercially viable product. But there was no money changing hands with respect of the company to the individual patients in the study, or if the company to the institution. And this is one small example, but it's a small example, I think, of what we need to be thinking of as precision medicine evolves fairly quickly, and as AI begins to permeate the practice of medicine, because without a huge trove of personalized data, AI is not going to be able to do or meet its full potential, and precision medicine will never get to where it should go.
Very interesting. Further comments? I will say that one of the things about consumers that they're often, and we seldom pay attention to that, they're often the source of innovation themselves. They are not just passive consumers in a sense that I'm consuming a hamburger type of situation, but more a lot of the best products, ideas have come from consumers who have tweaked treatments or have tweaked products to turn them into something that works for them. There are online communities such as Patients Like Me, where patients are participating in coming up with or testing treatments that may or may not work, or and which, if we had to go the traditional route, waiting for the healthcare system to figure out the best studies to do so, would have taken many years. So consumers is not as something to be feared in the healthcare setting, but they could definitely be a source of new ideas and innovation.
Yeah, and I think that was the last point on the slide there, that historians of technology are often, it's, I think of Ruth Schwartz-Cowan's work on the consumption junction, the idea that people using technology are also contributing to, if not inventing it, contributing to how it looks and is used. I'm also a little bit curious about the extent to which patients are thinking of themselves as consumers. I was trying to parse, whether it was an actors or an analysts category. I think in most cases it's the latter. And sort of in thinking about this discussion, even when patients are using and shaping medical technologies, I'm not sure how much they're thinking of that action as an act of consuming or something that they're doing as a consumer. So that's something I'd like to think about more through the talks as well.
With respect to that, I just have a quick comment. If you look at your typical clinical trial, the way that usually works is an institution or a research team will be approached by biopharma to conduct a trial on a new putative medication for whatever. And the pharmaceutical company will pay the institution or the research team X number of dollars per enrollee in the trial. And that money goes exclusively to the institution or the research team, and zero goes to the patient. I mean, that always seemed to me to be an issue. Because without the involvement of the patient, who gets paid nothing, the trial couldn't happen. Now, they would turn around and say, well, if the patient didn't volunteer their body or their information, then they wouldn't get the downstream care that we're going to be able to provide them. but the downstream care that they're going to get is not free. They're going to charge for it. So, we come back to the same issue. Upstream, patients are being, or consumers are being really taken advantage of by providing something for nothing, with the argument being downstream, you're going to benefit, but the benefit has a cost to it.
Further comments? Okay, with that, I think we can shift to the coffee break.